The Tom Woods Show, episode 1896.
Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. Before we dive into our topic for today, I want to remind you about the 2000th episode event. The 2000th episode of The Tom Woods Show is coming up October 16th, and I'm having a huge event in Orlando for it. And it doesn't cost you a thing to attend. But it's going to have a whole bunch of your favorites from The Tom Woods Show. We're going to have a ton of fun. You will be amply entertained, I promise. And as I say, it does not cost you a cent to get in. But it would help me out a lot if you would register and secure your spot. You can do that at tomwoods2000.com. If you can possibly make it, then make it. Bring friends. Tell people about it. Help me spread the word. Let's make this a huge bash. Because, my gosh, we've been put through enough, haven't we? Wouldn't it be nice to get together with a lot of like-minded people for a wonderful evening with good folks who are not brainwashed by Faucian propaganda? I mean, we all need this. A lot of people have been involuntarily stuck in their homes, or even if they could leave, there's nothing for them to do. Well, I got something great for you to do. We're going to have a great time at the Rose and Shingle Creek. It's not the same location as the 1000th episode event, so if you remember that one, don't drive over there, because then you're going to be sad. You're going to miss part of my episode, my 2000th episode. So you got to come over to the Rose and Shingle Creek. All the details are up at tomwoods2000.com. I want you guys there, as many of you as can possibly make it. You will not regret this. You're going to make friends while you're in the audience and mingling. You're going to enjoy the night, and it's going to lift your spirits after all the stuff we've been put through. So remember, it's not tomwoods.com/2000. It's tomwoods2000.com. Now, my guest today is Tim Baxter, who is a state representative from New Hampshire, a very young one, by the way. He's a mere 23 years old. And we're going to be talking today about, well, frankly, what his agenda has been, but more specifically, his interest in the issue of vaccine passports and what he can do to try to put a stop to that. So we'll definitely spend some time on that topic. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Let's start off with a little bit of your background, because you have first of all, you have a very young man voice. So let's talk about it. You are, in fact, a young man. So who are you and how did you get into all this stuff?
Yeah, so I'm 23 years old. And I actually grew up in high school and college watching your podcast to learn more about history and politics and economics. When I was a senior in college, I started a business and I started a nonprofit. And I decided to run for office because I saw so many corrupt politicians that were just constantly taking advantage of people, growing our power by taking away our liberty, our freedom. And especially as someone that was young, I felt an obligation to get involved and to fight back against corrupt politicians to protect our liberty. So I decided to run and knocked a bunch of doors, raised money, worked hard, and I was lucky enough to be given an opportunity to serve the people.
So you're from New Hampshire. What part of New Hampshire do you represent?
I'm from the Seacoast, so I'm right over the border. It's District Rockingham 20, and it's Seabrook and Hampton Falls.
Ah, is that okay? I remember when I was probably in elementary school, I took a tour of the Seabrook nuclear power plant. Does that still exist?
That's still there. Yep. It's a big part of our tax base.
Okay, just wondering about that. So you're not connected to the Free State Project?
I'm not. I grew up in New Hampshire. I was lucky enough to be born there. So I just, I love our live or die values, and I'm trying to fight for those as much as possible.
All right, so tell me, you're 23 years old. Remind me exactly, when did you get elected?
I got elected in November.
So you're brand new.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, refresh our memory as to exactly how the government of New Hampshire handled all this and what the state of things is right now, leaving the vaccine passport question aside for a minute.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there's definitely been a mix of stuff. I think Governor Sununu was very thoughtful in trying to not be seen as aggressive as some governors, but while also not wanting to be seen as someone that wasn't putting any restrictions in place. So he's always kind of tinkering with stuff. We've now rolled back the mask mandate. There wasn't a mask mandate. Then after the election, he put a mask mandate in place. So there's kind of been sort of this thoughtful approach. And I'm not saying that I support what he's done, because you can look from my voting record. I was joking with Melissa from Reopen. I was like, yeah, the next time election rolls around, I can fill out a survey stuff, but I've taken so many votes by now. You guys know everything I think about the state of emergency and the mask mandate and all of this. But I do think he tried to strike a balance between no restrictions and, some of the more aggressive approaches we've seen from Newsom or Cuomo or just Charlie Baker, close by to us.
By the way, who's the Melissa you're talking about?
Oh, Melissa Blasek, who's the president of Reopen. I believe they go by Rebuild New Hampshire now.
Okay, yeah, because she's also a state legislator. I also had her on the show.
Yes, yeah, and she's fantastic, and we work together. She's been helping me with my COVID vaccine passport bill.
All right, so let's turn our attention to that. But first of all, my sense about New Hampshire is that although there is that live free or die spirit among some people, there is still plenty of political division in New Hampshire. And I bet there, as in almost all states, there is a bitter divide over exactly what the right approach to take with regard to the virus has been. How do you handle it? For example, the people you represent, where would you say most of them come down on this?
Yeah, I think it is a mix. New Hampshire is a purple state. I happen to come from a slightly more conservative area. But to be perfectly honest, Tom, I don't really care what's popular. But one of the things that upsets me the most about politicians is they just constantly stick their finger in the air and wait to see which way the wind blows. And leadership, in my eyes, is doing what's right and fighting for liberty, protecting people's rights, especially when it's not popular. So that's the way I look at it. Just with this effort on vaccine passports, over 1,000 people have signed this petition. And essentially, the 1,000 people that have signed this petition are saying we're sick and tired of politicians telling us which of our rights we're going to be allowed to keep. A vaccine passport, let's call it what it is, it would create a medical caste system. And the last place that should exist is in the live free or die state.
Okay, so what is the nature of your bill? Are you the drafter of the bill? Are you a co-sponsor? What's your connection to it?
Yeah, so it's funny. When you get elected, they say there's 2 weeks, or I think it's actually a week, and that's the deadline to introduce a bill. They basically don't want freshman reps to introduce anything. But as you get in there, you start to learn the rules to work around the system. So in New Hampshire, any bill can get a vote on the floor, but also any bill, you can propose an amendment at any time, even if it's not germane. So I took SB 155, which is sort of a hodgepodge COVID bill, and I had a non-germane amendment. And I was able to find a committee where the committee chair was receptive and willing to hold a hearing on that. And essentially what the bill does is it stops any subdivision of the state government, any bureaucrat, from requiring a vaccine or a vaccine passport. Additionally, any company that does business with the state government or receives taxpayer funds would be prohibited from mandating a vaccine passport or vaccine for employees and also customers.
Okay, so now let's dig this apart here just for a minute. What would you say to somebody who says 99% of the time, somebody like you says that a private company is a private company. It can have any requirement it wants. It can say that while you're on our premises, you have to wear a funny hat. And the way you cope with that is say, well, if I don't want to wear a funny hat, I don't walk into that business. And that's the end of it. And so no transaction occurs unless both parties consent. And if one party doesn't consent, then there's no transaction. We don't violently interfere with that and say, well, we don't like this particular requirement you're imposing on people, so we're going to say that for this purpose, you're not really a private business. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's the question I'm getting all the time. And a lot of Democrats are bringing it up, even though they don't believe in that premise to begin with.
No, not at all.
Which is smart. I said if I was a Democrat, I'd be doing that too. I guess I'd say, number one, if you are a private business, say you're a coffee shop in Dartmouth, New Hampshire, a liberal college town, you can have a sign that says you have to have a vaccine passport still, as long as you don't get any taxpayer funding. But I'd say there's really two arguments in particular. Right to work is a good example. The government is essentially requiring the protection of our individual liberty in that example, because the government has already said you have to have the right to form a labor union. So if you have to have the right to form a labor union, then you should have the right to not join that labor union. So it's sort of a bill that needs to be passed because there's government there already to protect our individual liberty. It's a little convoluted, but I think that's a good example. And the second thing I would say is This push for vaccine passports, it's not coming from businesses, ultimately. Businesses just want to survive. They just don't want their customers to disappear. It's being ginned up by radical leftist governors like Newsom and Cuomo, and these radical beliefs from big government leftist politicians are seeping into our culture. And in essence, they're almost being forced on people in society because the mainstream media is gaslighting the public. You can just look at the poll numbers for why Democrats are 3 times less likely to guess the correct hospitalization rate than Republicans. It's because of what they're being fed by the mainstream media. I saw poll data before coming on the show. 41% of Democrats think the hospitalization rate for COVID is over 50%. That's nuts. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, I agree. Those numbers have been pretty constant. For example, I know over in the UK, it's somewhere between 10 and 100 times when you ask people about hospitalizations or deaths or whatever. They're not even close. They're way, way, way off. What's interesting is that the more informed you are, the more likely you are to be able to put the whole thing in perspective. It's the people who are the ones telling us we have to take this seriously and whatever, who are consistently the least informed over and over and over. Now, just today, I saw the results of a survey where they asked people who were vaccinated and people who are unvaccinated, how comfortable are you doing the following things? And it was everything from going on a cruise to attending a conference, and then now going on a date, shopping at a mall, flying on a plane, dining at a restaurant. For every single response, the vaccinated people were the ones who felt less comfortable doing it, even though they've been vaccinated and they believe in vaccines and they want to hit us over the head about vaccines. Now, it could be, obviously, there's a built-in bias here because the kind of people who would seek the vaccine are already extremely risk-averse anyway. But all the same, the result is quite striking. Now, it's interesting to me that the one of those activities, there are probably maybe 15 or more activities listed here. The one that people are most likely to feel comfortable doing is dining in a restaurant. Least comfortable is going on a cruise. But I'm looking at this, and I mean, even at this stage, only half the vaccinated people feel comfortable going to the mall. And 31% of them feel comfortable flying on a plane, attending a sporting event. 29% of the vaccinated feel like they could attend a sporting event. 27% think they should go to the gym. I don't know what's going on here. It's like we have 2 different societies.
I think we do to some degree. Things have become so polarized. I have a family member that they're vaccinated and they won't eat at a restaurant inside. They'll eat at a restaurant outside. And they don't want to eat in a restaurant inside until we get to herd immunity, until more people are vaccinated. And we saw what Fauci said, maybe next Mother's Day we'll get back to normal. And part of it, honestly, a big part of the blame lies with Fauci. He traffics in fear and he lies to manipulate the public. He's really not interested in pointing out the science unless it reinforces his agenda. And just look the other day from the testimony with Rand Paul, where Rand Paul absolutely torched him. Fauci even supported funding labs in Wuhan and its radical experiments that some of these labs were conducting, like gain-of-function research, which possibly may have led to the creation of COVID-19. So he's really supporting some radical stuff. And I like to joke, Fauci, he makes even slightly more money than the president. And maybe that's fitting because he's just barely smarter than our president.
Yeah. Well, for anybody out there, I can't imagine people listening to this having a problem with it. Anybody out there finding it questionable to say that he lies, well, he more or less admitted it. He said that he had been moving the goalposts on herd immunity as he felt like the country was prepared to hear what he had to say. Well, that's another way of saying you're lying.
Exactly.
What else is that? I mean, he admits that it wasn't the truth time and again. What is that other than lying? So what else has he been doing this on? And then he's on, either side of an issue, depending on which person he talked to last or which person he's sitting in front of. And I could compile a whole bunch of areas where he said one thing and said another. And it absolutely is true that early on he was against the use of masks. It absolutely is true. He was not simply saying we need to conserve them for our healthcare workers. He was saying there are problems with masks. It's not clear if they do any good. We don't have any data.
Yeah.
He was very clear about that. Then suddenly universal masking was the order of the day, and all that was just forgotten. It wasn't even, look, I know this might seem puzzling. However, I've decided that we just got no acknowledgement at all. It's been crazy.
But that's another great example is he wanted to deter mass usage because there was a shortage. So he sort of was like, well, we're going to talk about how I don't think it's good for the public. And he talks about that first as a justification for why it's okay that he was wrong on that. And you're right. It's just misleading. That's all it is to it.
Hey, folks, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is like the Netflix of online learning. You get one membership, and that gives you access to thousands and thousands of classes that teach you the kinds of skills that can make you a more valuable employee, that can set the stage for your own side hustle or even your own business. But also they're just for plain old curious people and creative people who'd like to be able to do something tomorrow that they couldn't do today, who'd like to go beyond their comfort zones. I'm talking about classes in illustration, design, photography, animation, productivity, marketing, entrepreneurship, and more. I've told you plenty about classes I've taken, but let me tell you about my own daughters who have taken classes on Skillshare. They've learned sign language. They've learned character development in fiction writing. They've learned about doodling as an extension of their art. All kinds of things they've taken and thoroughly enjoyed with Skillshare. And remember, these are manageable classes. These aren't 3-month, 27-module courses that you'll never finish. They get right to the point. You learn something specific and finite, practical that you can implement immediately. And there are thousands and thousands of these. The sky is the limit. Explore your creativity at Skillshare.com/woods and get a free trial of premium membership. That's Skillshare.com/woods for a free trial of premium membership. So tell me, I'm just curious about a young state legislator. I mean, are you maybe the youngest state legislator in New Hampshire?
I'm not.
Have you checked? You're not.
When you're my age, you do check these things. But I will say this, my claim to fame, I might not be the youngest, but I did raise the most money of any of the state reps.
Wow. Now, what do you attribute that to?
Hustle? That's a good question. Yeah, a big part of it. I was really lucky. People really invested in me and invested in fighting for liberty and fighting back against corrupt politicians. I made hundreds and hundreds of phone calls. Sometimes you get rejected and you just don't give up and you keep on going. I'm in the Hazlitt Coalition, so I think a little bit of it has to do with Young Americans for Liberty.
Okay, can you tell people what the Hazlitt Coalition is? I spoke to a group of legislators in the Hazlitt Coalition at the end of last year. So it's basically just a bunch of like-minded state legislators from around the country that Young Americans for Liberty in some way supports. But I assume it's just a loose, informal group.
A little bit. Young Americans for Liberty, their organization, they're involved in college campuses. They promote, pro-liberty ideas, and then they're also helping to get liberty-minded state reps elected across the country. And their goal is to get 250 state reps elected by the end of 2022. And I believe it's 178 they've gotten elected so far. And they also work on getting, liberty-minded policies elected across the country. They'll help you work on liberty-minded bills. So it's a nice coalition. It's a close-knit family. You can bounce ideas off each other. I'll call up other reps in Hazlitt. I've gotten to know a fair number of people from all over the country and to see what they're doing, to see, what the establishment's doing in their state and how they're fighting back. So it's really important that we have an organization like them that's leading this charge across the country to fight for our liberty.
When you ran during your campaign, well, first of all, were you running for an open seat? Was there an incumbent?
So it's kind of funny how the districts work in New Hampshire. They're all different. My district, 6 people ran in the primary for 3 spots. It was a Republican district, so it was very likely that all 3 would go Republican. There was 2 incumbents running again. In the primary, I came first of the 6, and then in the general, I came second of 6, being 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats.
Were there particular issues you ran on? So in other words, when people voted for you, they knew what they were getting.
I was honest with people what I believed in. People would ask me, do you support X, Y, Z? And I'd say, yes, I do. And some people, I'd lose their vote. The big things that I ran on were cutting taxes, cutting government, doing that to help our small business community, and just general conservative principles, general promoting liberty and freedom. And a big thing, it's funny, us that are more kind of nerds, and I say that as a fellow listener. We're all kind of nerds.
Oh,
that
yeah,
listen to this podcast.
I use the term affectionately, absolutely.
But, you run for office and you think it's going to be 21 questions about the issues, and it's not that way. A lot of people ask, where do you live? What street do you live on? What's your business? What's your nonprofit? They want to learn about who you are. And I think a lot of voters are rationally ignorant to some degree because politics is so corrupt that they have so little impact on it, and they have to put food on the table to pay bills that they default somewhat to, is this a real person? Is this someone that's corrupt? A big thing I saw was, would you shake someone's hand in the primary? Because for them, it's a test. If you won't shake their hand, is this really someone that's going to fight for me? This seems like someone that is too scared of COVID in my book. So things like that were more important than what all your policy positions are. Now, people did ask on some of the main ones, but for a lot of people, they just wanted to get to the essence of who you were as a person.
Did that come as a surprise to you? It would come as a surprise to me.
A little bit, but I had also knocked at least 5,000 doors before that, so I kind of knew how it was going to be, but it's still a little surprising.
So, it was clear to people that you had been against the COVID restrictions and that you weren't going to abide any of that. So they knew that they were getting somebody like you.
Yeah, I answered honestly that, I didn't think we should be in a state of emergency, especially not the way it was done, where it was done without the approval of the legislature. So I've always been for getting back to work, for freedom, welfare.
Is the vaccine passport issue entirely partisan? Is it all Democrats on one side, all Republicans on the other, or is it more subtle than that?
I think it is more subtle than that. And the way I know that is, I looked at some of the newspaper articles that are written about me, and the comments or the like reactions were 6-1, 7-1 positively. So maybe it's just the people that are against this are really against this and more interested in it. But I do think there's a lot of people that, because as a society we've said we're not for discrimination generally, we've accepted public accommodation laws, whether some of your listeners agree with that. That's what most people have accepted. And so the idea that we're going to discriminate against people, whether it's flying or traveling or getting a job or even something as simple as going to the supermarket, I think, to a lot of people, that seems like a slippery slope. And, what we're talking about basically is dividing society into two groups, where one group then discriminates against the other group because they don't like the medical choices that the other group made. And I think most people think that's pretty extreme.
It's been interesting to try to track polling data on this. It does differ by state because, of course, some states are redder than others, let's say. I've been surprised that the percentages of people in favor of the vaccine passport are not higher than they are, given the propaganda, given, in effect, the society being held ransom. If you accept this, you can have your life back. I'm shocked that more people, I think it's, some parts of the country, it's as much as 70+% who are in support of it. And I don't know if that means passionate support or they're just resigned to it. But there are other parts where it's not even 50%. And I don't see how you ram that through when not even half the public supports it.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And I think most people agree with that the vaccine should be available to all, but it shouldn't be forced on anyone. And I think some of the people that think about it a little more closely too, we realize that once this is enacted, it can get expanded, it will be abused, it will be exploited by the politicians. That's what politicians always do with programs like this. So the time to fight this is really now. And there's going to be a link in the show notes below. So please go to that link to sign my petition to show that we have grassroots support to stop vaccine passports in New Hampshire. And I like to say, it's a violation of our privacy. It's a violation of our HIPAA rights. And this is really something out of an Orwell novel. And it doesn't belong in New Hampshire, especially New Hampshire being the live free or die state.
To make it easier on people, I'll have the link on the show notes page, but I've also made a convenient redirect for people listening so they can easily get to your link. So it's tomwoods.com/passport. So go do that. Now, if the person signing the petition is not from New Hampshire, does that mean that nobody in the state government is going to care about that person? Are you primarily aiming at New Hampshire residents?
Primarily in New Hampshire, but one of the things that's happened because we've been on Zoom with our committee testimony is we have people testifying from California and New York on legislation all the time. So the more signers we have, the stronger it looks to the representatives, and especially in particular to Republican leadership. And as I'm sure your listeners can imagine, sometimes the leadership is not always so strong on protecting our liberty and freedom. So please go to that link, tomwoods.com/passport to sign the petition.
All right, excellent. So we'll do that. And then do you have your own website or a page at the State House or something?
Yeah, so baxterfornh.com is my website. That's the best place to read more about me. In addition, my Facebook page, you can just look at Tim Baxter for state rep, and you can read more about it, and you can get my updates about what I'm doing there as well.
All right, I'll put all those links up at tomwoods.com/1896 for everybody's convenience. And Tim, it was great to get to know you, and thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate having the time to chat with you today.
All right, folks, here's something that will lift your spirits as we wrap up this episode, and that is a website called wearedrivinghope.com. This is a site that the cause started in March 2020, and they say, we started to share the hope of Christ by meeting physical transportation needs for people who are in dire need. Because having a working car can be the difference between being employed or losing your means of livelihood. Sometimes just a car repair, a full tank of gas is all that's needed. Other times, some people need a whole vehicle. Well, the folks at wearedrivinghope.com believe voluntary action is the way to go on this. They accept one-time and recurring donations and vehicle donations, and 100% of your donation will be applied to meeting the needs of clients. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, and it has the Tom Woods 100% seal of approval. What a great cause this is. So check it out at wearedrivinghope.com. I'll link to it on the show notes page, tomwoods.com/1896. And remember, this could be your upcoming weekend project. If you've been thinking about starting a website, make sure you get your hosting through my link, and I will help promote it for you and also give you other really, really valuable benefits that will get you off to a good start right out of the gate. So for the details of what I can do for you, it does not cost you anything, check out tomwoods.com/publicity, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit tomwoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.